Welcome to the Claire and Horatio Daily World Brief, available at claireandhoratio.com. Imagine making over $1.4 billion in a single year, completely legally, from an industry you are actively deregulating from the Oval Office.
Which is an astronomical sum for a sitting executive. I mean, by any historical standard.
As of July 1st, 2026, newly released financial disclosures reveal that U.S. President Donald Trump has done exactly that with cryptocurrency ventures in his first year back in power.
The civic stakes of this disclosure, well, they pull us far past a traditional market story, or even a standard portfolio of real estate holdings. When you look at the mechanics detailed in these documents, you are witnessing the complete absence of a blind trust.
The 927-page mandatory financial report outlines a scale of executive profit that fundamentally tests the boundaries of American legal and ethical architecture.
Right. The structural integrity of U.S. governance is being tested by this direct, ongoing blending of executive policy with personal profit. And on a multi-billion-dollar scale, we are observing the highest office in the federal government acting as an active participant in a highly volatile, speculative financial sector.
The specifics within those 927 pages map out the exact machinery of that blending. The president earned over $500 million from World Liberty Financial.
And that operates as a joint venture involving his family and his Middle East envoy, T. Woodcuff.
An additional $600 million came from CIC Digital LLC. That's an entity generating massive liquid income through Trump-branded meme coins that launched just days before the 2025 inauguration.
You know, when a sitting president leverages brand identity to extract $600 million from retail crypto markets, the traditional boundaries between political influence and market capitalization effectively vanish.
The timeline of those specific investments introduces immediate foreign policy complications.
It does. 4 days prior to the 2025 inauguration, associates of an Abu Dhabi royal purchased a 49% stake in World Liberty Financial for roughly $500 million.
Shortly after taking office, the administration executed at least 10 discrete policy actions directly benefiting the United Arab Emirates.
The most notable of those actions involved loosening the export of highly restricted artificial intelligence chips. These chips are historically tightly controlled due to national security concerns regarding technology transfer.
When a foreign entity injects $500 million into an executive's private venture and subsequently receives favorable adjustments to critical technology export controls, the concept of impartial foreign policy is severely compromised.
Exactly.
In parallel to those foreign policy maneuvers, domestic regulation of the exact industry generating this wealth has been systematically dismantled. The Securities and Exchange Commission, under April 2025 appointee Paul Atkins, has shifted aggressively away from strict crypto enforcement,
dropping numerous investigations into major exchanges.
Meanwhile, an amendment in the Senate designed explicitly to stop the executive branch and lawmakers from profiting off cryptocurrency was blocked along party lines. When the executive branch directly profits from an industry, it is simultaneously deregulating. Does the traditional legal framework for conflict of interest even function anymore?
Well, the legal framework for conflict of interest at the executive level has always relied heavily on adherence to established voluntary norms rather than strict statutory enforcement.
Or has it been rendered entirely obsolete?
I mean, those norms have now been explicitly bypassed. The administration's stated defense asserts that the president is technically exempt from specific federal conflict of interest laws, which effectively neutralizes traditional oversight mechanisms,
creating an environment where personal financial accumulation operates entirely outside of legal scrutiny.
even as the administration directly shapes the regulatory environment that guarantees and expands those profits.
That evasion of legal scrutiny at the executive level creates a glaring contrast with ongoing judicial mandates working their way through the civil courts.
You're referring to the E. Jean Carroll case.
After 4 years of litigation across the federal court system, the Supreme Court on Monday officially declined to review the defamation and abuse case brought by the writer.
Meaning Carroll's legal team is now demanding the president immediately pay the $5.8 million in damages.
Damages which include accumulated interest, stemming from a New York jury's finding of liability for sexual abuse and defamation.
The juxtaposition of these two financial realities is stark. You have a chief executive utilizing the mechanisms of the office to generate over $1 billion in unregulated digital assets, while simultaneously exhausting every possible appellate avenue to delay a court-ordered civil penalty of $5.8 million.
Demonstrating a bifurcated reality regarding the rule of law.
Right. There appears to be one standard of rapid, unhindered accumulation for executive financial ventures and a prolonged, evasive posture against basic civil accountability.
This aggressive posture from the U.S. executive branch is triggering a direct defensive restructuring among traditional allies. The European Central Bank is rapidly advancing the deployment of the digital euro.
And European Union policymakers are no longer framing this project as a mere technological upgrade to keep pace with private cryptocurrencies.
They are explicitly describing it as a geopolitical necessity to Trump-proof their economies.
The stated goal is to insulate the European market against sudden U.S. tariffs, or the weaponization of U.S.-dominated payment systems, specifically Visa and MasterCard.
Systems which currently process the vast majority of Europe's daily retail transactions.
The vulnerability Europe faces regarding its payment infrastructure is profound. If Washington decides to leverage its control over global financial plumbing, whether through sudden sanctions, sweeping trade barriers, or restricting access to American digital wallets, Europe currently possesses very few independent alternatives.
We should view this digital currency not as a speculative asset, but as a sovereign economic firewall.
The digital euro is designed to guarantee currency sovereignty. It ensures that digital transactions within the Eurozone remain entirely under the jurisdiction and monetary policy control of the European Central Bank.
The mechanics of implementing that firewall carry significant public consequence. To prevent catastrophic bank runs, the ECB plans a strict holding cap of €3,000,
which translates to approximately $3,420.
and the currency will accumulate zero interest. Can a digital currency with those kinds of severe limitations actually protect European consumers from American trade volatility? Or is Europe simply too deeply entangled in U.S. technological infrastructure to ever truly decouple?
Well, total economic decoupling is highly unlikely given current global integration. But mitigating catastrophic risk is entirely achievable. The $3,420 holding limit and the zero interest mechanism are vital structural safeguards.
Without a holding cap, citizens could instantly transfer their entire life savings out of private commercial banks
Directly into the central bank during a crisis, which would immediately collapse the private lending market. By imposing these limits, the ECB ensures the digital euro functions exclusively as a secure payment method, not a savings vehicle.
giving European citizens a guaranteed state-backed mechanism to buy groceries, pay rent, and conduct daily commerce, even if American payment processors are suddenly restricted.
Or shut down. Or subjected to retaliatory tariffs.
The defensive posture Europe is taking extends well beyond digital finance and into physical security. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is spearheading a parallel push for a more European NATO. Germany has formally pledged to hit a 3.5% defense spending target by 2029.
This is a deliberate, massive acceleration of military investment aimed at reducing reliance on Washington's security umbrella.
For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinaratio.com.
The specific timeline of 2029 for German defense spending is a clear geopolitical signal. European capitals are fundamentally recalculating their strategic depth.
They recognize that relying on the volatility of American electoral outcomes for their fundamental security guarantees is no longer a viable long-term strategy.
Exactly. The investments in both the digital euro and an independent military apparatus show a continent attempting to build parallel structures before the next major systemic shock occurs.
The defensive decoupling we see happening in Western finance and military alliances leaves a geopolitical vacuum that accelerates physical crises elsewhere, particularly in South Asia.
Pakistan has issued a stark warning to India regarding the 65-year-old Indus Water Treaty.
India has held this treaty in a state of abeyance since May 2025, following the Pahalgam attack in India-administered Kashmir. Pakistani politician Bilawal Bhutto Zardari declared the river a lifeline for the nation,
And warned that weaponizing shared water constitutes a direct threat to the state's very survival. The Indus Water Treaty has historically survived multiple kinetic wars between these two nuclear-armed neighbors.
acting as a rare, resilient mechanism of regional stability.
Right, so India's decision to hold it in abeyance represents a severe strategic escalation. The rivers governed by this treaty originate in Indian-controlled territory before flowing into Pakistan.
By effectively pausing its participation and threatening to restrict water flow without formally withdrawing from the pact, New Delhi is exerting immense pressure on Pakistan's agricultural baseline.
It is a calculated retaliation against what India claims is continuous cross-border terrorism, utilizing a vital natural resource as a geopolitical weapon.
The legal reality of the Indus Water Treaty is that it literally contains no provision for abeyance or temporary withdrawal.
It was designed by international arbiters to be permanent.
By operating entirely outside the treaty's established framework, India has created a dangerous legal gray area.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, Pakistan's western border with Afghanistan has ignited into open conflict,
The Taliban regime launched strikes into Pakistan's Balochistan province.
prompting immediate retaliatory airstrikes from the Pakistani military. The UN reports 36 civilians killed in Afghanistan, while Pakistan claims its strikes eliminated 29 militants. How does the weaponization of a foundational river system in the east, combined with cross-border terrorism and airstrikes in the west, alter Pakistan's internal stability?
It traps the Pakistani state in a multi-front existential crisis. On the western border, the military is expending massive financial and tactical resources to contain an emboldened, heavily armed Taliban regime.
A regime that Islamabad previously supported.
Right, and on the eastern border, the threat transcends military posturing. It is elemental. Agriculture constitutes the absolute backbone of Pakistan's economy, employing nearly half the workforce.
And it is entirely dependent on the Indus River system for irrigation.
So when state survival is threatened by acute water insecurity, the threshold for military escalation lowers dramatically. You are looking at a financially fragile, nuclear-armed state facing simultaneous severe pressure on both its territorial integrity and its basic caloric survival.
That weaponization of fundamental resources forces us to look at how different nations are managing the physical geography of the broader climate crisis. In Germany, the government has officially saved the 12,000-year-old Hambach forest from lignite coal mining.
Following a grueling 50-year battle involving environmentalists and energy conglomerates.
The remaining 14% of the original woodland is being permanently converted into a state conservation area. In stark contrast, the U.S. administration has rapidly moved in the opposite direction, opening 500,000 square miles of protected Pacific waters and massive tracts of public land to immediate commercial drilling and logging operations.
The divergence in national policy is profound here. Germany is actively absorbing the short-term economic cost of leaving highly profitable fossil fuels in the ground to protect biodiversity and stabilize the climate over the long term.
The current U.S. approach is aggressively accelerating extraction, treating public lands and protected coastal waters primarily as immediate revenue streams to be monetized.
And this rapid dismantling of conservation protections in the U.S. directly fuels the localized financial and physical ruin we are already witnessing on the American coastline. It accelerates the very hazards that communities are struggling to survive.
Grounding that abstract policy in civic reality, a May study concluded that New Orleans has officially reached a climate point of no return.
Due to the compounding effects of rising seas and rapidly subsiding land.
And the total absence of a federal strategy for managed retreat, the Louisiana coastline could move up to 62 miles inland over the next century. Consequently, New Orleans community groups like A Community Voice are bypassing the government and taking DIY action.
Because without federal coordination and funding, managed retreat dissolves into unmanaged, chaotic abandonment.
They are physically traveling to Vicksburg and Natchez, Mississippi, cities over 130 miles away, sitting a safe 66 feet above sea level, to actively scout temporary shelters and catalog empty homes for a future, inevitable climate exodus.
The federal government has spent over $15 billion on levee systems for New Orleans since Hurricane Katrina. But structural engineering has physical limits against a rising ocean and a sinking marshland.
When the state provides no blueprint, no buyout program, and no relocation funding, the burden of survival falls entirely on local, often underfunded neighborhoods to negotiate their own exodus.
And secure higher ground before the water arrives.
The residents of New Orleans function as an indicator species for the future of coastal America. One resident interviewed noted that his home insurance premiums jumped from $900 to $9,000 annually over 2 decades. If the basic cost of living becomes prohibitive due to extreme weather risk, and the government's only proposed solution is building marginally taller levees to protect a shrinking tax base, aren't we just watching the slow, unmanaged financial death of coastal America play out in real time?
Financial death always precedes physical inundation. Decades before the ocean permanently claims the streets, capital flight claims the community. Insurance becomes fundamentally unaffordable, 30-year mortgages cannot be secured by new buyers, and municipal bond ratings inevitably collapse.
When a city cannot issue bonds, it is drained of the vital funds needed to maintain basic infrastructure like roads, schools, and the very pumps keeping the water out.
It is a slow, systemic strangulation. Those with the financial means leave early, while the most vulnerable populations are left trapped in hazard zones with depreciating physical assets and failing public services.
The localized financial ruin driven by climate exposure mirrors the global financial ruin driven by volatile commodity markets. The price of cocoa surged to nearly $13,000 a metric ton in 2024.
Only to suffer a catastrophic 75% crash, dropping down to $3,000 by early 2026.
Ivory Coast and Ghana produce two-thirds of the world's cocoa, and the human impact of this rapid market deflation is devastating. Multinational buyers have simply halted purchases.
Leaving over $487 million worth of harvested cocoa rotting in Ivorian ports. This scenario is a textbook example of systemic structural failure masquerading as a simple market dip.
The global supply chain is intentionally engineered so that African nations export the raw materials at base cost,
While Western chocolate manufacturers and financial traders capture the massive profit margins associated with processing, branding, and futures trading.
when the market spikes, traders lock in their profits. When the spot price crashes, the multinational corporations simply halt their physical purchases.
Which forces the producing nations and ultimately the individual smallholder farmers to absorb 100% of the market risk.
The farmers on the ground bear the entirety of that physical and financial burden. Cocoa farmers are reporting they cannot afford basic survival necessities, food, medicine, or school fees for their children.
And the inability to pay adult agricultural laborers means children are being pulled out of classrooms to work the harvests, drastically raising the risk of child labor violations.
The abstract mechanics of a futures market directly dictate severe human rights outcomes on the ground.
The global commodities market operates with a profound, often intentional detachment from the human labor that actually sustains it. A price drop on a glowing trading screen in London or New York translates directly into missed meals and lost education in West Africa within weeks.
This structural inequity is maintained by a system that demands cheap raw materials to subsidize high corporate margins in the global north.
Until international pricing mechanisms include a guaranteed living wage that protects producing nations against these engineered market crashes, the cycle of poverty and exploitation will remain entirely predictable.
The stories we are examining today map out several distinct pressures moving in very different directions. We see U.S. executive power actively monetizing its policy influence through digital assets, while European allies pour massive resources into building sovereign economic firewalls.
At the same time, vulnerable populations, from the sinking, underinsured streets of New Orleans to the financially abandoned cocoa farms of West Africa, are bearing the brutal brunt of systemic shocks without any reliable safety net to catch them.
Institutions that were explicitly designed to provide stability and protection, whether it is a federal government managing climate retreat, an international treaty governing shared river water, or market regulations meant to protect smallholder farmers from ruin, are either buckling under pressure or being deliberately dismantled for profit.
The pattern emerging across these disparate events is the fracturing of the traditional social contract. Citizens are increasingly left to their own devices, forced to coordinate their own local survival strategies in the face of massive systemic risks that require state-level intervention.
When the state steps back, the sheer burden of survival falls on the individual. Whether you are a neighborhood group in Louisiana scouting higher ground in Mississippi, a European policymaker trying to shield your domestic economy from an unpredictable ally, or a farmer navigating a collapsed global market, the question remains: who steps in when the systems we rely on refuse to function? And what does society look like when everyone is forced into DIY survival? Visit clarinhoratio.com for more daily world briefs and classic audiobooks.